Indie Game Garden.
I know I usually start these episodes with the guest's name and going on and talking about their bio, but for this one, I really just wanted to say that I mean every single word. Some of them might sound hyperbolic, and I know the guest himself would agree with that because he's very humble and a lovely person, but when I say that Adrian Vaughan might just be the most interesting video game guest I can think of, I'm not just saying that. I invited Adrian on the show after being absolutely stunned by his work on The Drifter, in which he voices multiple characters, none more impactful than the main character, Mick Carter. Listening to Adrian voice Mick changed my perspective on the value, cathartic joy, and emotional resonance that voice acting can bring to a work of art, video game or not. Then I did a little research. Lo and behold, Adrian has voiced characters in a number of other stellar indie games, including Loco Motive and Harold Halibut, and has some cameos in the recently released Mouse PI for Hire. But wait, there's so much more. He's also been working as an artist, 3D modeler, and art lead at game studios since 2007. For his day job, Adrian has helped create and ship titles like Civ VII, Shattered, Age of Empires 3, Smash Golf, Need for Speed, No Limits, and many, many more. What an absolute gem of a person and practitioner. I'm genuinely thrilled to be having this conversation with him today. Well, Adrian, such an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for spending some time with me today. I had so many brain blast moments in researching your career in games. So I want to start with a question that kind of unites your interests under one banner. What was your initial interest in working in games? Did you start as an artist before realizing that kind of building skills in 3D modeling was the route in? Did it start with a love of gaming? Where was kind of the impetus?
All righty. Well, first, thanks very much for having me on, Johnny. It's a pleasure. I don't get asked to be interviewed much, so this is very flattering indeed. So thank you. I guess sort of basically video games for me have been something that's always been around. It's just since I was very young. Both of my uncles were software engineers for IBM, so this is during the mid to late 80s. Always a computer in the house. Just started with Commodore 64, then moved on to, some really lo-fi 386 and 486 PCs. And, pretty much because of that, almost every friend I made in primary school and moving through secondary school, we always had that in common. We'd always been playing games. People owned different kinds of consoles. And then as I got older, it became more about PC computing and, then CD-ROM games came out, and that was huge for me. And so, the reason I mentioned that is because there was a particular game called The Seventh Guest, which was the game I bought and played the most when I got my first Pentium 90 PC with a dual-spin CD-ROM. And there was something about that. I'd never seen full-motion video in a game before. I'd never seen fully realized 3D in a game before. Not that it was real-time. It was all pre-rendered. But at that point, I got a little bit fascinated, and my dad saw me playing and said, that's CAD. And I'd never heard of that before. And so basically, I just started reading about it. And so my dad would buy me big, thick books. I don't know if you remember pre-internet, they used to, actually, of course you don't remember. But pre-internet, there was a big culture in bookshops of these gigantic 1,000-page manuals, for Linux, for Windows, for all kinds of stuff. And so there were a lot of multimedia books knocking around at the time. And so there was one called Multimedia Madness by a fellow called Ron Wadowski. And that was just fascinating to me. And so that was probably in, I don't know, I think that might have been around 93 or 94. And so I got this big book, and it was just a big book listing all of the different software packages that people use for multimedia. So that was, very early Corel, PhotoPaint, Photoshop. I was obsessed with video, so Adobe Premiere was in there. And then there was Autodesk 3D Studio. I think it was Release 3 at the time, which was a DOS-based 3D program. And I think Myst had come out by that stage as well, and I was just utterly obsessed with the idea of 3D, and I'd never touched it before. And I was fortunate enough to go to school with some boys who lived in Hong Kong. And again, this is back pre-internet, where Hong Kong was very well known for having massive pirated software markets where you'd spend $10 and get a CD that had pretty much everything you could want, every game, every, advanced software package. Piracy protection was really easy to break back then. And so I got a CD bought back that had a full suite of stuff on it, including 3D Studio. And I just installed it, and I'd buy a book when I wanted to learn something additional and just set myself little projects, basic modeling, basic sort of animation in the different animation module. And and I just pretty much from about the mid-90s through till the mid-2000s, I was just a hobbyist. I'd just do it in my spare time, along with lots of video editing and bits and pieces for nothing in particular, just, stuff I wanted to make. And that's pretty much how I got into it. Well, I think my original intention was to be a special effects artist. I was, very into films, and I wanted to do animated movies. And for whatever reason, one of the first jobs that I got attention for was by a small company, the same one where I met Dave and Barney from Powerhoof. And it was just pure accident. I'd made an animated show reel. The guy who ran the company had seen it and said, "Oh, this is actually appropriate for what we're doing." And so I landed in games in about 2006, sort of by accident, after sort of pursuing a film career or an animation career. And that's how I got into the games bit. Sorry, I left that off the end.
No, need to apologize. It's fascinating how some of that like early interest in 3D and kind of learning the computing behind it was from games and being fascinated by the progression of games like Myst, and then coming back into games in a professional sense just because, someone happened to see the reel is a cool circular moment.
Well, it was very, I think people, it's much more regimented and formal now, especially getting into video games. There's lots of institutions that offer an education specifically in video games. That stuff really didn't exist, and it was all very much, luck. Actually, it was just a lot of luck as far as I could tell. There were guys who'd been in it longer than me at that stage, but I had no idea how they'd arrived there. And it was just, I fell into it. And I think there was some early education places open at that point that were training people for video games. But I just fell in, and I think a lot of people fell in. It was the Wild West.
Yeah. It's cool to think about, particularly with how, it's cool to think about a games industry at all existing, which now is it's so splintered relative to back then, especially.
Oh my God,
but it's also cool to think about how there was kind of just this grassroots, oh, you can do this, come over here and try. And that's something
absolutely.
that Dave and I talked about in the interview, in his interview as well, was how anyone with skills at that point was you could walk down the street and someone would want you to help with something, which is
it was
cool.
Just opportunities they were still rare. It was still a small industry, but at the same time, if you showed up with an interest in at least some capability, it seemed that you'd land something. And so, it was a very different time.
Yeah. Speaking of different time, it was funny to hear you say, of course you don't remember pre-internet, because actually my dad worked at Sun Microsystems as a software engineer and published one of those big, thick books. So I actually know more about it than someone who was born in 1999 probably normally would, but certainly not firsthand. But
they were fun. They were great books to have because you could put your monitor up on them if you needed extra height. So very helpful.
I've seen him actually do that many a time. I was wondering, did you? It sounds like no, but I was wondering, what was kind of the art study? Did you study any of this modeling stuff at university?
No.
It was all just on the side. What was kind of your training at university and beyond, or what was the path that maybe you diverged from when you landed in games?
Well, so I enrolled at university to do what was called a Bachelor of Multimedia Media Studies, which had a 3D component to it. And I popped in there, met some friends who were great, and we had a really good first year uni. But I was, because it was such a new module, they'd basically taken anyone who showed any kind of interest in it and given them a tutorial. And so I probably arrived a little bit, I was more capable in the first couple of years of that course. I wasn't going to learn much, I guess, is the upshot. And so the thing was, for whatever reason, I didn't leave university because of that. I actually dropped out after my first year, but that was because, the friends I'd had, I dropped out for social reasons and eventually got a job in banking to start with. And so I had, that entire time from the late 90s through till the mid 2000s, I was working very straight sort of sales, and I worked for a government department for a while. And so I did a lot of very straight jobs before I ended up falling in there. But art study wise, it was pretty much what I liked, and there was no real formalization around that part of it. I was obsessed with the idea of getting an animated film off the ground. And so I sort of, and it was a noir sort of thriller, well above and well beyond my capabilities at the time. But I just decided to do little vignettes from it and just build little environments and learn as I went. And so I guess there's a lot of elements of that style that have stuck with me, particularly as far as lighting is concerned. I always liked that sort of very sort of, it's not really noir, but it's a very crunchy palette. I like a lot of contrast. I like a lot of warm hues. And so, I guess I sort of just rolled with what I was capable of and what I sort of showed interest in. I think for a while I joined something that was called the Star Wars Modeling Alliance, which was a very early internet place where people just modeled, X-Wings and TIE fighters and just put them up online. And so I'd download these, I think they were 3DS or OBJ files, and just bring them into scenes and make these little animations with Star Wars things. And so there was a little community around that. Again, very early internet, no robust social presence or anything like that. It was just you upload your animation and people say, oh, that's cool. And that was pretty much it. So I didn't really form a style or do much, formalized exploration of, art. It was I guess it was something that I'd always been interested in because I've got a reasonable background in sculpture when I was a boy. I loved, polymer clay and doing little sculptures, all the way through my primary and secondary school. That was something I did for fun. And also, I'm a cartoonist of I'm not particularly good at either of those things anymore. Like eventually the 3D and computer stuff sort of took over. But I'd always been interested in doing artistic bits and bobs, and so the 3D just became a natural extension of that.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I love how the kind of interest in cartooning, interest in sculpture can be expressed, somewhat whimsically in your professional career
Absolutely.
and in games. And just speaking of that, so in 2006, you landed your first gig. How did it progress from there? What was kind of the trajectory professionally for you?
Yeah, so the reason I got the gig, I think, is because I like to taper my buildings in this little animatic I'd done. And because they were making a Looney Tunes game at the time, which Dave and Barney also worked on, for whatever reason, the CEO just saw that and said, oh, that looks vaguely like what we're making. Get him in here. And so I got in there and I found out pretty quickly that I didn't know anywhere near, my education up to that point had been very ad hoc and based on what I'd sort of just wanted to do. And so my methodologies were poor. I was a little bit sloppy in terms of technique. And so just being in an environment where, I was a little bit older by probably about, I think I was 3 or 4 years or maybe 5 years older than most of the people there, which back in your 20s is a lot, but now it's absolutely nothing. So learnt so much from everyone just because we were all in this place that was, I'm not sure how much Dave talked to you about the company, but it was very it was very ramshackle. They were professional. They had some licensed titles that, back in those days, like I said, the Wild West, anyone with the sort of nous and a bit of cash behind them could secure work because, the Australian dollar was a lot weaker than the US dollar. We were broadly culturally aligned. The skill base was roughly the same. But American companies and publishers could make games in Australia for far cheaper, and licensed titles they really didn't care about. So they were just happy to farm out all kinds of stuff to Melbourne in particular at that point. I think Queensland and New South Wales had a little bit, but Melbourne seemed to be a bit of a hub for it. And so basically started there, thought I was, it was just so exciting to be in a professional context making art. And so learned a lot, made some great friends, many of whom we still talk to. We've got a little Discord where we catch up with, so many people I still know and catch up with from that time. Because the good thing about working at a place that's a little bit poorly run is that, you do form close friendships with people you're in that sort of mess with. And
Totally.
and so from there, basically I was let go after a little bit of a downsizing. Basically the money around licensed titles had started to become a little more competitive. And so I was let go and I found my way to another company in Melbourne. And that was a much more effectively and efficiently run operation, but still working on the same stuff, movie license tie-ins for kids' games, stuff like that. And so there, it was, again, good just to be working in a slightly more formalized structure, more team organization, and also continuing to learn because, again, fairly incomplete skill set at the time. And so just meeting people, discussing, and that's the one great thing about working in games, especially at that time. Everyone was very keen to share. And so it's just like, oh, no, I found this new technique for doing this. And it's like, oh, bloody hell, I've never done that. And, I always tessellate at this point. And so, if you had friends and you got on well, there was always this fantastic back and forth of, I approach my lighting like this. I do my color work like this. And then, oh, I can't believe you do your textures like that. That's cheating. And so, it was pretty great in terms of just a free flow of information. And so then from there, that was around the GFC. I think we're talking around 2008. And so after the GFC, lots of the video game companies in Melbourne, went into massive downsizing survival mode. And during that time, I went and worked as a recruiter, and I also worked in advertising for a very short amount of time. And then eventually when things spun up, as part of my going into recruitment, which I wouldn't recommend to anyone, it's not tremendous fun, nor advertising, it's certainly not a lot of fun. Anyway, I found my way back because a candidate I'd interviewed, I'd actually worked with her boss at a previous place. And he had this very peculiar job making shoes for an interactive Adidas wall I think it was in London. And so
Wow.
He had hundreds and hundreds of shoes to make in 3D. And so I went and made shoes for him for about a year. And yeah, that was a huge learning experience. A shoe is a very complicated, nightmarish thing to build and to UV and to texture. And so, it was just brute forcing these things. And then after that, I went to work at EA, I think was after that. And that was, again, just a totally different world in terms of organization, a very well run, very regimented, highly organized, and highly, very well funded organization. And so, as much as I don't think anyone was particularly in love with the products we were working on, and they were products, it was like you get exposed to that high end franchise stuff. You work with teams that are very well run. You learn what a streamlined operation looks like. But the best part about it was just, making a little bit of decent money for the work you're doing, whereas you'd probably been underpaid before, and were even underpaid then, but by comparison, it was huge. And just, again, working in something that felt, at the time for me at least, like it was like going back to university. Everyone was just there to have a good time. We had, abundant timelines, very sensible, controlled work. No one was especially stressed. We went out a lot and, drank and hung out. So that was really fun for about 5 years. But all the time we were sitting there going, God, I wish I could work on something better than this. Even though, it's, it was lots of mobile gaming. So that's got all its own peculiarities and, ethical concerns and all of that stuff. So that was always looming in the background, and everyone, sort of wished they could work somewhere better. And then the same guy I made the shoes for had secured outsourcing work for Age of Empires 3 and basically wanted me to come back to be a lead on that. And because my time at EA, it was basically there was very little mobility within the organization because no one wanted to leave. And so, you had leads who were there, who are still there. This is 5 years hence. So I was there for 5 years. Actually, it's probably 6 years now. But anyway, many of the people in leadership positions there were and are still there. And so
Yeah.
the ability to go up was very limited. And that's not a bad thing. They still treated you very well, and you could become senior and you could sort of focus on your work. But I was keen to take the opportunity to try and, push it a little further. And so I was offered that opportunity about 3.5 years working with some very, very, very young, very new artists. Again, that boss at the time was very much about hiring for initiative and sort of aptitude that was not about explicit skill. And so, and that was also a great time. Very scrappy compared to coming from EA and working, in a very well-appointed office and then going into a warehouse where you had to wear a rug during the winter because it was too cold. But my boss at the time he's very mechanically minded, and so he'd built a coffee machine, a very elaborate coffee machine from an old boiler that he'd found. And
Wow.
so the coffee was excellent and the hot chocolate was very good. And so people managed to get through. But that was a great 3 years. And then from there, God, I can't even remember what happened next. Oh, I had a very brief and ill-advised revisiting of advertising and real-time graphics for Web3 and a bunch of other nonsense, which I thought, oh, that's interesting. And it wasn't. And so I ended up washing out of that and coming back to where I am now, where I've been for about just shy of 5 years. So anyway, sorry about that. That's long again.
No need to apologize at all. It's fascinating to hear, and one of the things that became apparent to me as we were going through the saga was like how you talk about, maybe at first getting into it was luck or just getting your foot in the door, which I think is somewhat different than today. The luck seems to be spread thinner.
Yes.
But I think similar to today, what a lot of, I'm sure, younger people can take from this is like you're still hustling, job to job to work in art. And I feel like in particular, like hearing the like winding path that you've taken to where you're at today and how, where you might be in 5-10 years could be completely different. Like,
without a doubt.
It's heartening, I think, if someone's going through struggles, but if someone's like hopeful about, getting one job and sticking with it and it being fulfilling the whole time in something like, making art or in a creative industry, I think this is like representative in a way. So it's meaningful to hear. And I appreciate you laying it out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But another thing that, I've seen a few times, especially with younger artists, but it's certainly not all of them. It's every now and again you'll bump into someone who has a very explicit idea of what their career needs to be like. It's like, I'm going to work at Valve. I'm going to go via this place. I am going to just accrue what I can, and I'm eventually going to push myself to this other place. And, I've not worked everywhere, but I've worked enough places to know that, and with enough different people to know that the problems of one studio are present to a greater or lesser extent in even the best places you can go. There is no guarantee of a future at any of them. Even a company that makes one of the most successful, generationally relevant games can be gone in a very short period of time. There is very little security about, and that's not something I'm saying people need to get comfortable with. I'm just saying that where you are at the time is worth focusing on, especially if you're working with people that you really get on well with. It doesn't matter what you're making. It does. Obviously, everyone wants to make something amazing. Everyone wants to work on a grand franchise or on something that really resonates with people. But in the meantime, if those opportunities aren't available, there's plenty to be learned and plenty of good work to be done on stuff that you probably wouldn't play yourself. And you can still invest yourself in it and say, look, I want this to be, at a certain quality level. I want to invest this kind of artistic sensibility. There's so much latitude to do good work, even on stuff that you're not that thrilled about. And so, aim for the stars by all means, but not at the expense of where you are, I guess, is the main takeaway for me.
Very important message. And it's also, it's inspiring for me as a games player to think about how, the people who are creating the art in, some of the games that are held up as, the best of all time, whether that's something that's more like console specific, like The Last of Us, or something more classic like Chrono Trigger or what have you, like all of them were at one point like making an advertising slogan that they didn't care about, or making like a crappy game that no one's ever heard of or played. And so it's cool to think about how the skill building that comes along with some of these, more poorly designed or less remembered games does funnel the
absolutely.
Cream of the crop. Yeah.
There's so much good stuff that's gone into very average games, and you see it every now and again. You're like, oh my God, this is an impressive way that they've lit this scene. I don't know why it's in this game. But in addition, there's also, I can promise you, at every one of those places, when they were making Last of Us 2, when they were making Red Dead Redemption 2, there were at least 2 people on that team who were like, oh, I wish I was somewhere better than this. And they exist everywhere. There are people who exist. It's this constant drive to be at this idealized studio where everything runs impeccably, pre-production's abundant. There's nothing but, brilliant ideas being thrown around by everyone. The art team's firing on all cylinders. And yeah, it's never happened to me, not once. Which is fine. The thing is there's plenty of fun to be had in the margins. And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, these are great words, and I think all really important to hear. I was wondering, before we kind of head back to your professional side, when did your voice acting come into the fold during your career? I was honestly, I know for a lot of things, whether it's like actor or model or what have you, like a lot of folks who do those positions do them part-time, but like the quality of your performance in The Drifter is genuinely like the best voice performance I've heard given in a game.
Get out of here.
And I've played a lot. No, it's true. It's true. It just the context of the like way the game looks and the way you deliver the lines. I can say that with complete honesty. You're a stellar talent, all while doing this on the side, and I just I want to know the story.
All right. So when I was in, I guess, primary school, secondary school, in addition to playing video games, I watched a lot of television. I watched a lot of, my particular favorites were Cosgrove Hall stuff when I was young, like Wind in the Willows, Roger Ramjet, a whole bunch of stuff that many people probably wouldn't have heard of. Actually, a lot of people my generation definitely have, but they've not really survived or been amplified in any way because, cartoons changed. We got Thundercats, Silverhawks, all of that stuff, which I also loved. But so I watched a lot of telly. And I would watch telly and I'd sculpt things, or I'd watch telly and I'd draw cartoons with a friend. And so, yeah, I think and also I listened to, way back, my mother was a big fan of audiobooks and used to get them on tape. So this is a very long time ago, and they were always read by very, high-level English actors. I read, Tom Brown's School Days read by Rowan Atkinson. There was just a whole bunch of audiobooks, and so I'd listen to audiobooks and watch TV. And so I think I just had a lot of different voices poured into my ears over a long time. And because I don't remember when, but I used to just walk around, doing bits and pieces. And for whatever reason, there was no formalized theater available for me. And so until I got to secondary school, at which point jumped straight into the theatre. I was very, very active in that space, took drama whenever I could. And then after leaving school, I was lucky enough that a bunch of friends that I'd met in the year above me started a small touring theatre company, and they asked me to come along. And so, it's like they were great people, very clever, some of the best and brightest people I know, still active in entertainment today, I think. But yeah, we had a great time, and it really wasn't as earnest as that sounds. I don't think, you can imagine that sort of thing. It's like, traveling theatre troupe. And it's like, it wasn't like that at all. We were having barbecues and drinking a lot, and just, we all liked theatre and we all liked performing. And so we just put on shows at different beaches around the Victorian Surf Coast, which, it's a lovely stretch of scrubby beach that runs along Victoria's. It's great, and there's plenty of little towns along there. Where a bit of live theatre done by a bunch of weirdos down at the front beach is a great way to have a beer and then go out for the night. So yeah, anyway, did that, and after that, there was part of me that was thinking, you should pursue being an actor, because I wasn't bad. Like, I wouldn't say I'm amazing, but I'm not bad. I'm capable. And so, I thought, maybe I'll try out for stuff. But the thing that became apparent very quickly was not that the opportunities just weren't there. They weren't. Of all the people who want to be an actor, there's a very small number that filter through. But also, I can't stand actors. I can't. It's just. And the thing is, and to a degree, I hate that part of me that does it, because there's something so you can almost not avoid becoming a cloying, needy, semi-narcissistic personality, because it's so much of you on show. It is how you look. It is how you sound. The judgments are about you. It's not about the performance. If you're very lucky, you can get to the performance stage. But, every bit of feedback is about how you did something wrong, or or sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's great. But every bit of negative feedback hurts a little bit. And so I lost interest in it for a long time. And then it was just Barney and Dave and a few other friends from that company who we were still hanging out. We started just to sort of mess around with it. Like, I think Barney wanted to make an animated show about beards. And Dave was always doing, he had his little adventure games. We made a couple of very early game jams together. But the thing was, there was a need for voices. And they didn't know that I did it at all, or that I had any acting background whatsoever. And so I just did them, and they were kind of like, oh, we can use those. And so I just kept doing it in that capacity. And then, and this is again, another massive stroke of luck. Barney and Dave started Powerhoof. They made Crawl. And because they've both, I hope they don't listen to this, they've both got very finely tuned artistic sensibilities, and they both have they're both very passionate about quality. And so when they do something, they throw themselves at it very hard. And so Barney had made this trailer for Crawl. He wanted me to do an eldritch horror voice, which for whatever reason, I could do. And so that trailer, when we made it, it sort of, but it wasn't like 50 billion views, but it got a lot of traction, and especially in indie circles, and it became very high profile, and people were very, very nice about the vocal performance. And so on the back of that, I secured not only additional, Barney, Dave and I still make stuff to this day. We've done game jams a lot. And I still get people emailing me every now and again about, I love the Crawl trailer. Would you be able to do a voice for this? I also accidentally developed a board game sort of practice where cool. I do trailers for Kickstarters for board games, and it was off the back of that Crawl trailer I got my first one, and that's got to be 9 or 10 years ago now, and I'm still doing board game trailers for whatever reason.
Oh, cool.
And it's just that one lucky break where a lot of people, a highly visible lucky break led to a lot of other stuff. And fortunately, because of the nature of indie development, where if they can get one person to do a bunch of different voices, that's a huge boon for them, because it allows them to, not have this elaborate casting process and this elaborate sort of file management process. If they can get it all down to a few or a handful, it's very handy. And so because, again, too much telly as a child, a lot of different accents in my kick. And so, I kept getting lucky, and people would approach me. And so I've auditioned for a bunch of stuff, and, got some, not got some, but I am extremely fortunate that I can do it in the capacity that I do on a very limited basis, based on what comes across my inbox and what I like. And so, that's been huge. And so it was really that one lucky break.
Oh, that's very cool. And I love how, as the interest in 3D, which used to be hobby, has become job, that you now have this other artistic hobby that you can get paid for and do on the side. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's again, I couldn't be luckier. I'm extremely lucky in that regard. And I just, I'm sure that luck still exists, but it's just probably changed shape a bit now, and is a little bit more, there's more people out for that luck. But then again,
sure,
generations before me, it sounded like, I just wandered down to the studio and they put me in a film. And it's like, I don't know,
Things are always changing.
They are,
but
they certainly are.
There are. It does seem like it's still out there, as you say. Like, someone could see a TikTok or this or that. Yes, it's just it's all over the place in ways that I think is harder to predict these days.
Yes, and that's another thing I noticed. Like, when a game comes out, I'll often look at Let's Plays of those
Yeah,
games just because I want to see how the beats go over. It's really as a person who makes games, and this is universal across everyone who makes games, and it's probably the same with film. It's probably the same with a lot of the more creative pursuits. There is nothing better than watching someone enjoy the thing you've contributed to. It's also very damaging when they hate it, but at the same time,
right.
there is nothing better than watching someone play stuff and waiting to see how they react to certain beats or what their response is to a certain, artistic choice, music. It's always fascinating to watch. And so every now and again, I'll dip in and I'll have a look at a Let's Play. And this is to your point before. The one thing I've been stunned by is the fact that there are a lot of very talented, competent Let's Players out there with microscopic subscription bases and,
Right.
3 views per video. And I'm like, this guy is every bit, or this guy or girl is every bit as talented and exciting and engaging to watch as the people who have these colossal fan bases, or even the middling ones. There's just, again, it's luck. Does the algorithm favor you? Does something cut through with the right person who shares it? The luck's still there, but it has changed shape a lot.
Yeah, and these days with the saturation of creators, I think while some of it can be luck, a lot of it is also just like wherewithal and means. Like,
Oh
do you
yeah,
have the means to keep doing the thing and like not
without a
get a
doubt.
job that prevents you from doing it or what have you?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So and just like doing it over years and years, like that's one of the things that I encounter all the time when I'm feeling either inspired or dejected with like podcast creation or what have you. Is like my favorite podcasters have been doing it since like 2013 or what have you, so it's
Yeah.
not like these things that we encounter are built overnight, even if we might encounter them one day and be like, wow, how does this exist and I didn't know about it, it's awesome.
No, and it's great to follow creators and see that evolution. Like, because I watch an awful lot of YouTube now. And so you
Yeah,
look at something like, oh God, what do I actually subscribe to these? You look at, I'll just be like a Red Letter Media or something like that. I'm not sure if you are familiar, but
Red Letter
just,
Media, is it called?
yes, it's
Okay.
a film discussion thing. They started with one
Sure.
very, very popular review of Star Wars: The Phantom Menace done as a character, and they just
Yep.
expanded and expanded, and they've continued for years. And I can't get enough of it. And it's just they've got like 4 different shows now, and all of them are, it's I don't know. It's difficult to explain. They're not trying. It's almost as if they don't want to
Right.
be on YouTube, but they're doing it anyway because this is what they do. And, it's to see their early videos from like, 13, 14 years ago to where they are now. It's extraordinary just to see the evolution and how competent they've become at what they do. And so,
Yeah.
fascinating space to be in. But I don't envy it because podcasting is ferocious.
Yeah, I mean the thing that like I've definitely attempted a number of different creative things over my life, and the thing that
Yeah.
I keep coming back to with my current projects and feeling more sustainable whenever they do is like, especially these days, I don't think if you're starting something, you can view it as like a side hustle. You kind of have to view it as like, this is something I really enjoy. And if there's even like a smidge of like ego or like desire for eyes in it, it gets so,
Oh,
it feels so defeating so quickly.
it's
And
terrible
so
when you,
it's, it's so much more sustainable when you just are like looking forward to it when you get to do it each day, and that's been this show. And I wonder if that like I wonder if that intersects with potentially your experience of doing these pretty substantial creative hobbies on the side.
Um, that's like I love my job. It's no. I mean that. I guess I want to say I do love my job, but it's easy for me to say that because I've done a lot of jobs that I really don't like.
Yeah,
And I think when I hear someone who's lucky enough to be in an industry where there are challenges and it's not always fun. Some of it is incredibly grueling. Some of it is incredibly demoralizing. There are a lot
yeah,
of things that happen that are very unpleasant, and some days where I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to put up with this crap. I just can't believe it. And it wears you down. But the thing is, I've done several jobs where I'm standing on a train platform waiting to go to work, and I just can't bear the idea of arriving. And at
yeah,
lunch, I'm eating lunch and I can't bear the idea of going back. And I think that gives me a little a little bit of perspective that some people don't always have, especially now that people are entering the industry very young. That context is sort of missing. And I'm not saying, oh, harden up, get over it. It's great. It's fun, but it is challenging, and there's plenty in it that is not great. But yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is that, yes, there is a lot that pulls you to the job on a daily basis. And, well, actually not on a daily basis. Let's call it a bi-weekly basis.
Sure.
There'll be something that pops up that is very engrossing and engaging and demands a lot of you, and that you feel a huge amount of satisfaction either solving or moving through or getting the result that you want. And also working with other people. There's so much satisfaction to see someone else really, themselves solving a problem, introducing something new into the mix. There's a lot to be drawn from that. But that's not to say that there's not a lot of drudgery as well. And
totally.
with the voice stuff as well, I I find the actual process of doing the job, I don't know how to put this. I find the process of actually, well, it depends. If I'm working on something with Dave or Jacob Janerka, who we also know quite well, there's I've forgotten the company that made Crummets Tale, but there are certain people I work with on the regular that I do enjoy the actual practice of doing the voices, because it's collaborative, it flows, it feels lots of fun to do, and generally speaking, I don't have to edit what I do afterwards, which is, for lots of the work I do, where I do edit and master the audio because they don't have the stuff to do it on their end. It's something that I sort of do as a value add. But if I record for 20 minutes, multiply it by 3, that's how long I'm going to spend in the edit and cutting things out and mastering the audio. And so the fun part at the front can sometimes be offset by the fact that I've got to do this pretty tedious job at the other side, where I can't listen to music. I can't do anything that mollifies the fact that it's very grueling and it's a drudgery task. I'm not hugely into it, but also, yeah, it's the way I do voices. I do a lot of takes. I am very, very focused on what I think music people call the instrument. I monitor my voice very carefully, and I want it to behave a certain way. And in instances where that's easy, that's great. In instances where it's a bit of an uphill battle because your voice doesn't always play ball when you need it to. And in those instances where you have to focus on performance and managing the instrument so that it sounds right to your ear, it's a lot of focus and a lot of work, and it's not always fun. But the fun part is when you see it out in the wild and it's with a whole bunch of other people's work that just makes it into a complete something. That part I love. And so... Yeah,
that makes sense. I mean, it speaks to, I think, what a lot of creative folks, myself included, struggle with, as far as like, do I actually like this? With it being a question where you go back to the project you're working on, even if it's on the side in addition to work or to your day job, and it just being like, is this relaxing? No.
No.
Is it like getting me ahead at all? No. Is it fulfilling a creative desire within me? Like, sometimes. And I think that's why, like, a lot of projects that are even, scoped more than just sit down at the computer for an hour end up going unfinished, because it is so much like coming back to it and having to grind against what are oftentimes like formats, whether it's like recording in a DAW or like a coding engine or what have you, they don't feel good a lot of the time.
No, and I use like if you ask me, do I like Adobe After Effects? I'll say, I love it. I hate it. And it's because I love what it can do, but I hate the amount of file management and logistics that's required to get the result I want. And so, as much as I can say, I'd love to sit down and do this sequence, by the time I'm done with it, I hate it. And it's just, so the part can be grueling. But again, similar thing. The result can be the part. If that's worth it for you and the result is what you're shooting for and you can put up with the drudgery, then, I think you've found your calling.
Well, it's amazing that, like, these hubs of, like, just utter delight when it comes to something like The Drifter, like, talking to you and talking to Dave especially, he was like, that game like consumed me for 6 years. And it's like listening to these people create these delightful, like wonderful so heavily detailed experiences that you can play through in, whatever 5 to 10 hours you spend with them, and they're awesome. I think that's why there is this tortured artist trope, because in order to create something special, you don't have to torture yourself, but you do have to be so painstaking about the details.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, the Drifter for me, I do any game that Dave and Barney asked me to do, because again, like I said earlier, they are myopically focused on quality and what they want. And regardless of what it is, that the result is going to be a credible something. And that's why, there's voice gigs I've done for things that have been sort of on the path, I'll do this one, and then, ideally it gets a little more exposure. I've got something else to put on my reel. I've got another sort of logo to put on the bottom of my website, that sort of thing. So some of them are very much graft, whereas the Drifter is something that's just like, oh no, this is an end unto itself. This is something I would want to do, even if I was, a millionaire living in, Botswana, or I don't know why I'd live in Botswana, but let's say Spain. Even if I was incredibly successful and had all the money in the world coming out of my ears, I would probably still just be like, oh no, I want to do this because I know what's going to come out the other end, because of, it's the confluence of the people involved and all of the efforts that go into it. Animation, background art, music especially, such good stuff. Like Mitch and Louis did such a good job on the soundtrack. The soundtrack's too good for something that I'm in. I don't feel like I belong there. It's like, no, this is unfair. I'm bringing the music down. But it's just, it was always going to be, at least from my perspective, it was always going to be something worthwhile. Even if it wasn't successful, it was always going to be something that was worthwhile and that I would probably happily play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So well said. It kind of transitions nicely into my next question. Perhaps the Drifter is the answer, but I was wondering, what have been some of your favorite voice acting engagements? Like any favorite characters or anecdotes that stand out?
The Drifter's great. That's the easiest gig I've ever had, because it's very much I've been Australian in a game twice, and that's one of them. And so generally, it's easy for me because I can focus on performance, even though lots of the narration components, I want it to be very guttural. And that takes some calibration. And so there were times where I felt like, I could just walk through it. It's not a problem. My voice is in shape. I will just destroy this next section, and I can focus 100% on performance. And that's my favorite. And again, working with Dave, he's an excellent director. He knows what he wants. We disagree very rarely on intonation or phrasing, but it's great having someone who's, because he's written it, obviously he knows what he wants, but he's highly capable at doing that and getting something out of you that works. Sorry, where were we going with that?
Your favorite voice acting engagements and stories.
No, my favorite engagement is, I think it's the Game Jam stuff. I think the inanimate Mr. Coat Rack is my favorite thing that I am annoyed that more people don't play that, because I had a blast. And lots of the, Intergalactic Wizard Force, which we did with Jacob Janerka, even Bumbag, but we did so many game jams. We used to jam so much, over a period of about, I think, 5 years, where we did Ludum Dare, we did, Global Game Jam I used to do with some people from work. It's so much fun. And doing voices where time is limited, the player base is not really going to be focused on quality that much, and you can just really throw yourself at it. That's tremendous fun, and I love doing that. And so the Drifter, fantastic, enjoyed every bit of it. It was great, but that's much more a precision professional operation, whereas I quite like the ramshackle game jam stuff. It's great when someone just says, "Oh, do a Skeletor voice," and you're like, "Ah!" it's heaps of fun for me. So, yeah, those are great fun. I love the game jams.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'll definitely include links to those games, and by
all means.
Yeah. They're just on itch, so folks can pay what they want for those.
It's just I think we used to do. I think Powerhoof's got links to lots of them on their itch, but we did it as a collective called the Sea Dads, and there are so many fun games in there. Like it's because I didn't have a child at the time, but a few people did, so we called ourselves the Sea Dads, and that was Dave, Barney, me, a friend of ours called Gavin, another friend called John. Louis used to do music. Every now and again, Jacob would rotate in and rotate out. So it was just whoever was around at the time and felt like they wanted to spend 72 hours making something stupid, which was always, and that was always the focus. We, nothing serious, always very silly. And so, I think some of them are well worth a play. There's also, there's one called the Maitre D', which I think Markiplier's played a couple of our games, and so they got a lot more traction than they otherwise would. But, there were instances where the design from Barney or from John really, like, they're just lovely little innovative ideas, and they were fun to play as well. So not just very silly, but also some of them were very clever. Nothing to do with me that bit. I just did the voices.
Well, the voices are great in those too. I haven't played the Maitre D', but I have played.
That's
Mr.
literally
Coat
just
Rat.
me going, that's the whole thing. Oh, and saying magnifique and stuff like that. I just did.
Sounds pretty good to me. I should check it out.
Oh, dude.
I was wondering what your role was like for Mouse PI for Hire, which is like the newest game that's just come out that I think you've had a role in, and I just wanted to ask about it and say congrats that it's out.
Oh, thank you very much. I had precious little so the way PlaySide works is we have a lot of games in development concurrently. And so I didn't work on Mouse PI for Hire as an artist. That was in a different department to mine. But so because people are aware at work that I do voices, I'm often dragged in when they don't want to go through the rigmarole of hiring someone else and they know I'm about and that they can turn it around quite fast. And so there was a point where I was doing it when Mouse was in its demoing phase. I did a lot of, stand-in voices because it was just, they said, oh, Adrian, can you do, here's a script. Can you knock these out this afternoon so that we can have something in place for the demo? And gradually by inches, they replaced them. And that's fine and all. When you've got Troy Baker lurking about, I guess you have to use him. But anyway, so I did a lot of placeholder stuff. And the thing is, some of them just stayed. And I don't think it was because of the quality of the performance. I think it was because they were on tight deadlines. But, regardless, a couple of them lurk in the background there. So my experience on that was very much providing provisional stuff. I didn't hold back on it. I wasn't just going, I wasn't just doing the lines. I actually, I tried, I promise. But so there's a few just left in there. And that's happened with a few games we've made where, I think Age of Darkness, they needed some, Brummy soldiers running around. And so I did that. I did it for a game that we did for Meta that was just a silly golf game. I basically did all the voices for that. So just as part of just being in the studio, I often get thrown little voice gigs every now and again. They don't pay me, but I guess they pay me for the job, so that's fine. But it's just accidental and incidental for the most part.
Well, it's very cool. It's something I'm going to listen in for. It's on my list, so
I think
I can pick out the age.
I think I'm a waiter somewhere in there, and I think I'm a protester somewhere in there. But I have no idea. I haven't played it through yet because we played a lot of it when it was pre-release, and so I haven't grabbed the latest. But again, that was it's good to see like PlaySide getting something like that on the board, which is good fun.
Yeah, that kind of just goes to my next question. I was wondering, you've kind of answered it already, so maybe it's just like yes and move on. But what is the kind of intersection of like your professional connections and your voice gigs potentially outside the studio and outside knowing the Powerhoof guys? Have there been any crossover, any connective tissue, or is it mainly those two arenas?
It's mainly those two arenas. There's, like I said, the board game stuff operates satellite to both of them. So they saw a trailer, and so I move about in that space, not just for, it used to be for one company, but then I think just by dint of being on so many of the damn videos, people were just like, oh yeah, get that guy. And I'm reasonably cheap. I'll let people know I'm reasonably well priced. I'm pretty good. But the thing was, it's generally if they think they'll get a value add, like, oh, can you try a Lancastrian accent? Can you do that? And I'm like, well, yeah, I can do a reasonable job of that. And so it becomes, that space is pretty much people realize they can throw a lot of different stuff at me and I'll probably be able to handle most of it. And so, yeah, there's not a lot of crossover between board games and indie games, even though one stemmed from the other. There are a couple of people I've met who have, recommended me for gigs that have expanded that pool a little bit. But yeah, as far as the commercial 3D world that I work in and the voice stuff, it's really just about having me around and knowing that I'm available. I don't really, I think
I gotcha.
the bulk of, the indie stuff is really where I think the most exciting, interesting, and where people actually want to get me on board. That's where that is. Whereas at other places, it's kind of just like, oh, he's here, get him to do it. That's fine.
How is your current position as an art lead at PlaySide Studios? Sounds like you enjoy it. How is and I also had a question that's kind of satellite to this. How is working as an art lead different from like working in the trenches more as like a modeler or artist as part of a larger team?
Well, I mean, the obvious bit is you do get to slip past a lot of the hands-on stuff gets smaller and smaller, and not everyone wants to keep their hand in. Lots of people want to focus exclusively on art leadership. I tended to just try and throw a lot of the things that I do enjoy doing. I love lighting. I love color grading. I love I can do pretty. I'm pretty decent at doing large environment blockouts and stuff like that. I'm very much sort of steering towards the finished look kind of stuff. That's the bit where I enjoy myself the most in terms of hands-on work. The rest of it is, the great part about it is there's a lot of working with, again, good people. And the really good part is that, you do get to contribute a little more directly to the overall aesthetic choices. And that is something that you don't really get the opportunity to do at the sort of junior, mid to senior tier. You can make decisions and you can contribute. And oftentimes, the best leads will always take the stuff that comes their way that is valuable and looks great. I like it because you get to have more say. Yeah, you get to have more say in how things look, and you get to focus on the things that you enjoy doing in terms of hands-on work, and so that's great. But yeah, the real cherry on it is it's just working with people and being able to steer that. That's the funnest part by far. When you've got a good team and you've got artists that you respect, it's just great. Even on the game, like I said earlier, even on the games that aren't great, finding ways to solve problems that are technical, challenging, but also aesthetic. How do I achieve this kind of look with this minimal like software spec or hardware spec? There's a lot of fun to be had. But I think the best part about the lead part is I've worked with a lot of leads that are quite what would you say, prescriptive. People who want things done their way, using their software, the way they'd approach it, and everything that deviates from that needs to be controlled and curtailed. I am the opposite of that. So I heard something on TikTok a couple of weeks ago. It was from a guy who'd met Jim Henson at a Dark Crystal show when he was a boy. And he asked Jim Henson, he said, how do you make something like this? And Jim Henson, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't know what he actually said, but he said something like, if you have people you love, respect, and admire, and you come to them with a vision, and you leave enough gaps in that vision that they can fill those spaces with the things that they can bring to the table, you'll always get something spectacular. And I know it sounds a bit trite and goofy, but that's sort of very much how I like to work. I don't want to tell people, I like setting a goal and saying, let's go this way, and then seeing what people do to facilitate and achieve that goal. And, 9 times out of 10, you see stuff from people that is fantastic, and it gives them that autonomy and that confidence to start stretching themselves a little more. And that's where you get the best. Like, that's how you grow as an artist in this business, is by, those little micro challenges where you've got a little bit of guidance and some safety guard or some, safeguards and guardrails, and you push yourself a little bit. And it's just those little micro pushes that, develop your aesthetic, develop your approach, streamline your workflow, all of that stuff. That part I love.
That is, you sound like a great manager. It's really cool to hear this idea of it. Almost seems more like treating it like it's kind of a theater troupe in a way, or something along the lines that's a little more grassroots of like, well, we have what you do something, and like
Yeah.
obviously you're working in a context that the people you have together are highly skilled in this thing. But everyone does bring their own identity
Yes.
to it. And so it's cool that is the foundation of the innovation and kind of the driving. It's obviously not one vision, but it is a driving philosophy that I'm sure creates a very unique vision.
The thing is, I guarantee you, of all the best things that have ever been made, they're probably evenly split between people who had a very explicit vision and a very good idea of how to achieve it. But I guarantee you there are some fantastic things that have been made where there has been, a little bit of elasticity and some sort of willingness to change direction in service of the goal. And so, yeah, I don't advocate for one over the other, but I can tell you for a fact that the approach of letting people stretch themselves and make contributions that are meaningful, better teams, happier workers, it's just everything feels and moves so much more smoothly. And whether that results in a spectacular outcome or not, you can't guarantee that even if you do it the other way. So might as well have fun, because I didn't get into this business to work at something I didn't enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, it's great advice. I've had you for an hour now. I definitely want to be cognizant of your time. So just a few more questions.
That's all right. It's my fault for the overrun. I've been just rambling on.
Not your fault at all. For me, it's never an overrun. It's just you're a busy person. If you were to give some advice to an aspiring game artist, what would it be?
Set yourself. If you're comfortable, I'm a game artist, so let's go 3D. Yeah, sod it. Let's open it up to everyone. Get your hands on the software. Find the free versions if you can. If you can't find the free versions, steal the commercial versions and start to learn how to use them. I guarantee you Adobe relies on a certain amount of piracy to make sure that they remain like prime in the market. Because, if artists show up to your business and you don't have the product that they know how to use, you're going to buy it. And so, Again, I didn't say any of that. That was someone else who just walked in and walked out. But what I'm saying is, basically, get your hands on the software, learn how to use it, and set yourself a little goal. So if you want to build out a folio, rather than just you can do your studies, you can do all of this stuff, but the way it worked for me was to set myself a goal and say, I want to make a little trailer for a film that is in this style. And then you just have to set about solving all of the problems that are involved. And there's an abundance of learning information online. So I didn't have anything like that when I was young, but you've got YouTube, you've got, Reddit's there, you've got, there's plenty of resources. And so I'd say, set yourself a goal, something to make, and then set about making it, solving the problems as you go. And then ideally, at the end of that process, you've got something or multiple things to show. Dress it up, finish it, make sure it looks finished, and put it on your folio, and then move on to the next one. And if you do that, not only will you learn, but you might come up with, you'll come up with stuff that are sort of cross-discipline things that you have to learn, and then you develop an understanding of those cross-discipline needs. And yeah, whether it's a trailer, whether it's a game, whether it's a little animatic, whatever, just set yourself a goal and set about it and learn as you go. That's my feeling.
Yeah, great advice. Same question, but for aspiring voice actors.
Same thing, I guess. It's like, it's worthwhile if you are serious. First of all, you've got to ask yourself some pretty real questions about whether or not you're a capable performer. There's a lot of people who want to do it, and that's understandable. Some people think it's money for jam because you just show up and speak into a microphone and walk away with money, and that's true. But the thing is, if you are confident that your performance level is at a certain stage, then it's worth making the investment in the kit. So, you buy your microphone, you get your preamp, you get some software, and you just set about recording. The different part there is, whereas art I mean, they're both arts, I guess, but whereas practical visual art is something that you can do for yourself and you can workshop your own aesthetic, your style. You can decide what looks good and what directions you want to push in and how satisfied you are with what you do. Voice stuff demands an audience. And the only way you're going to get that is to throw yourself at everything that you can. And the best stuff, and the place where people are most in need of it, is game jams. Or at least if you're into the video game stuff, I'm sure there's animation jams. I'm sure there's all kinds of stuff out there. Throw yourself into those spaces. Get on the Discords, get on the Twitters or whatever it is these days, the blue skies, and find those places where people are making stuff and need help. And then you just throw yourself at that. And the more practice you get, the more you start to learn what works, working with people to provide them with the files they need, your formatting, what levels are you setting, do you denoise, do you not? You will find by throwing yourself at it, you'll start to learn all the bits that make it smoother and the process smoother, and ideally improve your performance as you go. Because there's a lot of, like I said earlier, there's a lot of instrument management involved. And yeah, you want to make sure that your performance is what comes through. And so eliminating as many of the roadblocks to that, which are largely technical, focus on that and you'll get experience in spades if you throw yourself at game jams. And, if you haven't got a game jam because you don't have a reel, spend some time fabricating a reel on your own and you'll still get that editing experience, all of that, like mastering, microphone technique, all of that stuff. Just throw yourself at something. I'm big on the autodidact approach. It's just throw yourself at something and solve as you go.
And I think people who maybe haven't tried that, or at least in the video game space, would be surprised at how excited people are to kind of bring you in. Like, that's something that I comment on all the time with this podcast, where like I can just email someone whose voice performance I really enjoyed and I have a wonderful over an hour long conversation with them that's making my day. So it's like, putting yourself out there is super important in spaces like this.
Definitely.
And
also you get to see something made and go into the marketplace and people play it and you see how they react. And if they say, this is voice acting's rubbish, at least you know that you've got some work to do. So that's helpful. True.
And you can feel what it feels like to have that fun part happen. And if it's not, a super fun part, then you can think about what might be more fun.
Exactly.
What keeps you feeling whole, nourished, rooted outside of work and games? Is it family? Is it another hobby?
No, I don't have room for another hobby. I've taken up gardening, but that's more a practical thing. I do enjoy a bit of gardening. It's good to, especially with my in front of the computer life and in front of the phone life, having yourself some outdoor activity that is about, again, just practically applying yourself to the garden is very, very refreshing and, just makes you feel good. I like that. Obviously, my baby daughter is lovely. That's more in the challenge side of things. Like that's engaging in another way, but it's also incredibly gratifying. I love that. I'm a late in life parent and I'm glad I didn't do it earlier. I think I'm less concerned with like career and stuff as I would have been otherwise. But yeah, it's fantastic. Having a daughter is amazing. I recommend daughters. If you're a guy, have a daughter if you can. They're fantastic. The other stuff which I don't do as often, and there's a couple of things that I love movies, always have loved films, and I don't watch as many as I used to because it's just hard to find the time, hard to dedicate yourself without picking up the phone. I need to watch more movies. I also need to get back into just making little things in polymer clay because I can't tell you after years of not doing it, picking it up and just working with your hands and not focusing on anything for an hour, 2 hours, unbelievable how calm and centered you feel after that. It is amazing. So I've got to do more of that.
Gorgeous. One last question. It's actually could be related to the movie stuff. You mentioned this style that you like earlier on in the interview, this kind of like, you said noir, but then not noir, this kind of like bright contrast maybe was the words you used. I'm not sure. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what inspired that style? And are there any like pieces of media you can point to and being like, this is kind of a great example of it?
This is a more subtle version. I guess I like it when it's cranked a little bit, but like anything by Roger Deakins where he's cinematographer, which is a lot of Coen Brothers films and also a lot of films that you know. And Roger Deakins is everywhere. And his sort of palette and contrast level is probably the gold standard as far as what I think a finished piece of cinema or even game looks like. It's just, that's the gold standard. The crunchier lo-fi stuff goes into your more like, again, sort of in those grindhouse sensibilities, like your horrors and your stuff like that. Razorback, that's an old Australian one, but also, Eggers' palette isn't as crunchy as I've seen, but yeah, I love the ramshackle crunchiness of lo-fi horror. I think sometimes that's amazing. I think the color levels are great. Oh, also old Hammer stuff is fantastic, even though that's much more washed out these days. Yeah, I love anything cinematic that has enough color information in the screen to make it look good, but also is quite comfortable pushing those levels. And I'm trying to think desperately of a really good example. I wish I had one to hand, but Fincher. There you go. That's it. Anything by David Fincher, that's the crunch level I like. Seven, Fight Club. Cinematically, in terms of palette, in terms of the final frame and how it looks, gorgeous stuff. And that's probably as far as I think you can push that contrast without breaking it, is David Fincher. Just immaculate grading, immaculate shooting and cinematography. It's just great.
Gorgeous. Yeah, well, good to know. I appreciate all the recommendations. I'm going to be checking as many of those out as I can. And just, again, Adrian, thank you so much for your time. This was
thank you.
A lovely conversation.
It's been very fun. I've enjoyed it. Like I said, this is my first... no one's ever wanted to interview me before, so that's exciting. But this was great fun. Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome back anytime.
Alrighty. I think I'm out. I'll have to get some more stories. I'm out of stories now, so... Yeah.
Well, thanks again. I appreciate it.
No, thank you very much, Johnny. Great to meet you.
And that was Adrian. Such a lovely conversation. I was having a bit of a so-so day before recording that with him, and it's amazing how a conversation with a bright, kind, creative person can turn a day around. So important to remember for all of us, especially when we're in the dumps, to connect with people and do our best to reach out, because it can be the hardest thing when things are not going well, but it can also be the best tonic. And I do hope that this podcast can be a little bit of that for people. I don't think it's any substitution by any means for face-to-face contact, but I do hope it brings some brightness and joy to your all's life. Adrian's just such a creative, fun, generous person. I will include links to as many of the things we talked about as I can find. Particularly, I think it's worth checking out those adventure games that he and the Powerhouse team jammed on, that he does voices for. The Inanimate Mr. Coat Rack is the voice gig that he mentioned having some of the most fun with, so I'll be sure to center that one, and I'm pretty sure it's a short play. It's readily available on itch, and that will be going in the show notes along with all the other stuff, like I said. So yeah, super grateful to Adrian for taking the time, for lining up the time zones with me. Going from Seattle to Australia, time zones are interesting, to say the least. It's like I've just done two. I've done Dave and now Adrian. Whenever we're doing that, I'm like, yeah, so that would be like 4 p.m. On Thursday for me, which is like, in the morning on Friday for you. Is this okay? And I don't know. It's a game in itself to schedule with overseas guests, and to schedule with guests in the U.S. here too, because I don't know, scheduling can be hard. Life is hard though. It's why regardless of where we're at, we need joy, and we need to stick together. So I hope we can continue to do that with games. One of the things that's been bringing me some game joy recently has been checking out just like small and upcoming demos and kind of like sifting down through the Steam lists of whatever fest they're putting on, searching not for the cheapest games, not for the games that have the most wish lists, but for the games that inspire me aesthetically, have demos available, and are just begging to be played. And I think that that's something that as we get more and more saturation with our indie media, it's going to be harder and harder to sift through ourselves. A lot of us just don't have that time. But I do encourage you, if that's you and you don't want to listen to this show or the Rex or, seek those out for yourself, going through and just like I'm imagining, I don't know if you've seen this show, but in Poker Face, Natasha Lyonne, once she's done being chased by the mob, just pulls out a map now that she's free and she doesn't have to be on the run, and she just closes her eyes and points to a place on the map. And that's what I want you to do with your Steam game, is just scroll all the way down the indie releases, point to one, and try it out. Even if it's weird or crappy, it might bring a smile to your face. And I certainly hope this show brought a smile to your face. If it did, and if you've listened this long, it probably means you want to do something to support us. The best thing you can do is to tell just one friend about the show. I don't do anything to advertise it, so word of mouth is the way that we get this out there. You can send me an email, indiegamegarden@gmail.com. Connect with me on Instagram @IndieGameGarden, on Blue Sky @DarthMalks. That's Darth like Darth Vader, Malks. And I'm on YouTube as well @IndieGameGarden. We release all our podcasts and do some shorts and stuff on there as well. So go have a look. And thank you so much for listening. I hope you're having a bright day. And if not, I hope this made it a little brighter. See you next time. Bye.